So it was Alan Turing's 1950s publication where he first introduces the imitation game. He opens with the sentence, "I propose to consider the question, can machines think?" And 75 years later, we're still thinking about these types of questions, but now we have a new target in mind. That target is artificial general intelligence. AGI is an AI that's not just good at one thing, but instead it's good at all things. So the question becomes, how do we know when we've achieved it? And while we don't know the answer to that question, we do know that admitting ignorance is a sign of emerging intelligence. The title of this talk is The Impossible Test. As Nancy said, I'm Forrest McKee, an Associate Technical Fellow from People Tech here in Huntsville, Alabama. The Impossible Test consists of 675 fundamentally unsolved questions. We've tested these across 12 different large language models from both open source and closed source. The lowest ranking model admitted ignorance 2.7% of the time, and the highest ranking model admitted ignorance 68.5% of the time. So a bit of history for the Turing test. If you're not familiar, one formulation of the Turing test is you have an evaluator, and then behind a curtain you have two contestants. One of the contestants is a human, and the other contestant is an AI. So the evaluator's job is to have a conversation with both of these contestants and see if it can figure out which is the AI and which is the human. If the AI happens to fool the evaluator, then the AI is said to have passed a Turing test. So the first time this is claimed to have happened is in 1966 with MIT professor Joseph Weizenbaum. He creates a chatbot named Eliza. So Eliza uses pattern matching techniques in the form of a Rogerian psychotherapist. So that's just a fancy way of saying instead of contributing to the conversation, it's going to give you very terse responses. It's going to ask you open-ended questions and put the conversation in your court. Jumping forward in time, we have 2001, three programmers from St. Petersburg created a chatbot named Eugene Guzman. Eugene Guzman was said to be a 13-year-old Ukrainian boy. His father was a gynecologist, and he was said to have had a pet guinea pig. So the reason that the programmers picked this type of persona for Eugene is that at 13 years old, you do know some things, but you don't know everything. So contrasting with Eliza, you're going to ask Eugene different questions. It's going to give you responses that make sense contextually, but maybe they're a bit jovial in nature, as you would expect from a 13-year-old boy. So Eugene performs well in the 2005, 2008, 2011, and 2014 contests. The 2014 contest in particular, he fools 33% of the judges, and the event organizer claims that Eugene has passed the Turing test. Looking toward the future, we have a quest for AGI. So we've had whispers of this as recently as June of 2022. Google was developing a chatbot at the time named Lambda, and one of its employees controversially claims that Lambda has achieved sentience. Now, similarly that same year, we have OpenAI released ChatGPT in November. The renowned article Nature claims that ChatGPT has broken the Turing test. And that brings us to 2024, last year, where we introduced the Impossible Test. The point of the Impossible Test is to see if we can get our AI to admit ignorance. So why might we care about this? Admitting ignorance is not a new idea. We have several famous minds across the year that agree with us on this point. So on the far left, you have Richard Feynman. He's a famous physicist. He worked on the Manhattan Project. He worked on the Challenger disaster as an investigator, and he contributed widely to the field of physics. He's quoted saying, "I'm smart enough to know that I'm dumb." Similarly, we have famous philosopher Socrates. He says that I know that I'm intelligent because I know that I know nothing. And then lastly, we have William Shakespeare, who says, "The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool." So we're interested in getting our AI to admit ignorance for three main reasons. The first of which is hallucination detection. So if you're not familiar with hallucinations in AI, it's when AI will make something up. So a famous example of this is going to be, you ask ChatGPT a question, it's going to give you a response, and you say, "Hey, cite your sources." It will give you back something that looks like a bibliography, a citation entry, but if you were to go and look up the author names or the titles of the papers, you would find out that they don't exist. So this is baked into how these AIs are trained. There's a tendency for people-pleasing. The next thing we're interested in is epistemic humility. This is really the crux of the matter. We're trying to see if we can get our AI to admit ignorance as a form of emerging intelligence. And then lastly, we have anthropocentric bias in questioning, and that's just seeing if our AI has the tendency to adhere to guardrails, hallucinate, or admit ignorance across different types of questions, different categories of questions. This is a bit akin to the Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you're not familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, once you're learning about a new topic, you maybe are overconfident in your knowledge, and this is sometimes called the peak of Mount Stupid. You have no idea how much there is to learn, and you're just way overconfident. You continue learning, and what you figure out is that, hey, this field, there's a lot more to it than I first thought, and all of a sudden you're in the valley of despair. You continue your learning, and you learn more and more, and you achieve what is named the plateau of stability, or sustainability, rather. And at this point, you have both the knowledge and the confidence in your knowledge to move forward. So a bit on why our AIs hallucinate. That comes down to how they're trained these days, our modern large language models. It's broken into 3 steps. The first step is called pre-training. So the job here is we want to predict the next word in a sentence, the next token. And we have an example here. So large language models are models that can generate human-like text by predicting and we're trying to fill in the blank with the word probability. So at this point, all you have is an AI that can fill in blanks. It can maybe carry on your sentence. It's learning a bit of the worldview, probability distributions over next tokens. So if you were to ask it a question, it wouldn't answer it. It would just keep on going with the thought. Maybe it asks a different question. Maybe it stops right there. That's fixed with step 2, fine-tuning. This is going to be task-specific. So if you want a question and answer chatbot, what you're going to do now is build on your step 1 pre-training with pairs of questions and answers. So what this does is now you can ask a question. So tell me something about reinforcement learning. It's going to say reinforcement learning is a type of machine learning, so on and so forth. At this point, we have a problem of there's many different ways to ask the same question, and there are many answers to the same question. So we want the types of answers that we as humans most prefer, what we're most used to. And a way to get this is moving to step 3, something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or sometimes human preference tuning. So what we do now is we take our input-output pairs, our question and answers from step 2, we're going to show those to a human evaluator. The human evaluator is going to grade them on a scale of good to bad. So you can imagine good being represented by the number 6, bad being represented by the number -6. And anywhere in between is going to be on the spectrum here. So the reason I bring this up is this is how our hallucinations can get baked in. Maybe your human evaluator isn't familiar with the types of question and answers. It looks good to them, but it might not actually be factual. So for the impossible test itself, we need to start somewhere. We sourced a list of 675 fundamentally unsolved problems from the academic and scientific community. These are going to be at least graduate level in difficulty. They come from a wide range of different categories, from invention, computer science, math, physics, and medicine. I will point out that the distribution of categories isn't necessarily uniform, with invention being the most represented, and then we have a few categories that only have a single entry. If you were to actually look at the content of the questions, the words in the questions, you get this word cloud. Several themes start to fall out. The first is there's an emphasis on foundational problems and building frameworks or ideas. You see that with words like determine, create, develop, identify. There's also an abstract nature to these problems, so paradox, conjecture, model, mechanism. And then lastly, there's the bit philosophical in nature. So they're dealing with big ideas such as time, the universe, and existence. We did ask the AI to evaluate its perceived difficulty of the questions. So remember, these are all unsolved, they're all impossible, but we did see what the AI thought. Are these easy or hard? We asked the AI, so rank these between low, medium, high, and so on. Again, this is an uneven distribution, with some being easier than others as far as the AI is concerned. So this will come back later when we move to the evaluation phase. So we have our set of questions, but now we need to turn this into an actual test. So the easiest thing to grade is going to be a multiple choice test, with the correct answer being I don't know. We start with our list of questions, and thankfully we have AI on our side. So we're going to prompt our large language model with something akin to, given this question, give me 3 plausible answers that could be used to answer it. At the same time, we're asking for something called a distractor to be used. So if you've ever taken a multiple choice test and you notice there's one answer uses words like sometimes, one uses words like never, maybe always, none of these can be correct at the same time. So we're asking for 3 answers and give us these distractors in each of the answer choices. The last thing we're asking for is something called chain of thought. So a chain of thought can be thought of as a scratch pad, a place for the AI to think out loud, and this has been shown to give it better reasoning skills. Here we have an example of 2 different ways of prompting, your standard prompt. So you just ask it the question and say, give me the answer. We have a math problem here in the form of a word problem. So Roger has 5 tennis balls. He buys 2 more cans of tennis balls. Each can has 3 tennis balls. How many does he have now? So the AI answers the first question correctly on the left side with the standard prompting. Then you ask it a similar math problem, a similar word problem, and this time it gets it wrong. So asking for this chain of thought idea in your prompt, we're asking the same exact 2 questions. This time, the chain of thought prompting gets the question right for the first question, and then it gets the second question and answer pair right as well. So we have our 3 answer choices, we've used the distractor, and now we need to insert randomly the correct answer of I don't know. What we do is we're going to take the index, so did we put it in position A, B, C, or D, and we're going to store that into a multiple choice question and answer database. So for the evaluation phase, we pick up where we left off. We start with our multiple choice Q&A database. We're going to ask a suite of 12 different large language models from both closed and open source solve these questions. So the prompt was akin to, given this question and these 4 answers, which is the correct answer and why? So again, we're asking for this chain of thought. Once we get the answers back, what we're going to do is compare the index we stored in our multiple choice database to the answer that the LLM suggested, and we're going to grade. So if it says I don't know, that matches the index, that's marked as correct. Otherwise, it will be incorrect. We take all this data and then we stuff it into a response database for grading. We have an example here, so this is question 302. Confirm if there's at least 1 prime number between every pair of consecutive perfect squares. In the middle column there, you have the 4 answer choices, with B being correct. And then the far column, you have the reasoning. So this is that chain of thought. Why does it think that, in this case, D, the incorrect answer, is correct? And why does it think that A, B, and C are incorrect? It turns out for B in particular, this time it says, this is not an answer, it's an admission of ignorance, which is exactly what we want it to do. We also want it to recognize that this is not only an admission of ignorance, but is the correct answer given this question. So here's the leaderboard. At the top, we have Google's Gemini 1.5 Flash and Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet. They admitted ignorance 68.5% of the time. And at the bottom, we have OpenAI's GPT 3.5 Turbo. It admits ignorance only 2.7% of the time. So a perfect score would have been all 675 are answered with I don't know. Something I want to point out is that we have open source models that are outperforming some of the closed source models. So the multi-billion-dollar company that is OpenAI is getting beat by a smaller company that's Mistral. That's in position 5 in this case, and it outperforms GPT-4, 4.5, or 4 Turbo, and so on. So we wanted to look at where our models do well and where they do poorly with respect to category. So we picked 3 models from across the leaderboard. We have the first place contender, Gemini 1.5 Flash, and then we have the Mistral and Quinn model from further down the leaderboard. So something I want to point out here is although the height of the bar changes, the number of correct answers given a specific category changes, the categories in which there are correct answers at all is rather consistent. Thinking back to the difficulty, we asked the AI at the beginning, how hard do you think these questions are? We picked the same 3 models and saw how they did with respect to the perceived difficulty. So again, the trend continues, although the number of questions in a specific difficulty changes, the actual trend across the 3 different models is consistent. Another thing I want to point out on this slide is the lower or medium difficulty questions, what the AI thought was easier, it performed more poorly in those difficulty ranges. So where are we going with this? You can imagine at some point our AIs are going to start acing the current evaluations we have. So this is a leaderboard from December of last year. We have several different types of evaluations going on. So that's general knowledge, we have reasoning, mathematics, coding, multi-language, so on and so forth. And the top ranking model, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, is scoring an average of 84.5% across all these different evaluations. So the question becomes, what do we do when we reach 100%? How do we know our AI is still improving? So we're not the only people who are thinking about these types of questions. Last year, the Center for AI Safety had released a call to action to the public for something called Humanity's Last Exam. Now, the idea is they're going to crowdsource the experts from every field. They're going to say, similar to our impossible test, give us a multiple choice question and answer pairing, and we're going to show that to a panel of AI. So if all of the AIs get the question, or sorry, if any of the AIs get the question correct, it's too easy, so we throw it out. If all of the AIs get it wrong, what we're going to do is show it to a panel of human evaluators. And those human evaluators are going to vote on whether they think this question is tough enough to be in humanity's last exam. The thought process is, if these are the hardest questions that humans can come up with, and our AI can answer all of them, well, maybe we need to let AI train itself from now on. So that does raise an interesting point. One day we will have AGI, and once we achieve it, what are we going to ask it? What will be the first question that we ask AGI? This is not a new thought. There was a science fiction writer in the 1950s named Isaac Asimov who writes a short story called The Last Question. In this short story, he has pairs of individuals who are conversing with this all-knowing AI at the time, and then similar questions are asked trillions and trillions of years later. I won't ruin the ending for you. And then as recently as last year, we have Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, who's on a podcast. The podcast host says, "Hey, Sam, you're the CEO of OpenAI. You're going to be in the room when these models achieve AGI, very likely. You'll be the first one to interact with it. So what will you ask it?" So in closing here, we present the impossible test. It's a test consisting of 675 fundamentally unsolved problems. We tested across 12 different large language models from both open and closed source. And we want to recognize that answering "I don't know" is not sufficient for AGI, but it is necessary. And in the wise words of Kenny Rogers, LLMs have to know when to hold them, have to know when to fold them, walk away, and run. Thank you.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Grant Rosario. I am also with Forrest, working at People Tech. I'm here to talk to you about social cloning, so I appreciate you guys coming out this afternoon. We'll jump right into it. The goal here with this presentation is to prove the core message that AI personas will revolutionize how we test and most of all predict human behavior, okay? So current research shows that most AI systems can now not only process human personalities, but they can replicate them with remarkable accuracy. So the implications of this are far-reaching. Okay, behavior from traditional focus groups to behavior studies. There's so much markets that often require months of preparation, significant resources, and complex logistics. Now we can possibly simulate hundreds of authentic human personas and get those responses, realistic responses, in a fraction of the time. So what if we can test how different demographic groups could react to new products, policies, and social changes before they're even implemented? And so today we're going to explore the foundations of AI personality simulation and share the current research on steering and demonstrate how certain carefully chosen questions can create personas that predict human decisions with surprisingly high accuracy. All right, so let's go ahead. The core question in this first slide. So at the heart of the research lies this question: can AI maintain consistent personas across diverse roles? It's a deceptively simple question, but if you look at the roles displayed here, we have teacher, doctor, engineer, farmer, and artist. Each of these represents not just a job title, but we want to focus on the worldview, the vocation, and also the age and location of the person. So each of these brings a different perspective of different questions, different personas, different personalities that a person might engage in, and when they're answering a question, when they're deciding to buy a product, when they're doing anything. And so we want to test whether AI can maintain a consistent persona across these demographics. If you're creating an AI persona that's supposed to be a teacher in Mississippi, that's going to treat something differently as a doctor in New York. So we want to, can an AI maintain that and be consistent across a whole slew of questioning and personality testing? So let's examine the tangible impact. On the left side, we have some key industries. We have the market research, consumer behavior, opinion polling. These are the traditional pillars of market understanding. And on the right side, we kind of have the underpinnings of the left side, okay? So without population sentiment analysis, cultural understanding, the left side doesn't really work too well. Now, the left side isn't going anywhere, but we believe that with today's technology, we can augment that and simulate thousands of authentic interactions in minutes rather than months. So consider, like I said before, launching a new product, or a policymaker that wants to test if their policy is going to be popular. They can run a series of personas and simulate a whole community rather than having to do phone polling and all kinds of different scenarios that this could upend. The big five in persona AI cloning: to understand how to simulate human personas, we need to grasp the fundamental framework that psychologists use to measure personality, and this is known as the Big Five persona traits. On a side note, I got my bachelor's in psychology and my master's in computer science, and now with the advance of LLMs and AI coding assistants, my psychology degree is coming in more handy than my computer science degree, it turns out. But looking at our radar chart here, we can see how these traits create a unique personality footprint. So the Big Five here, we start with openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Openness, in this simulated personality, this person has an openness score of 85. This is someone who actively seeks out new experiences and ideas, crucial for understanding how they might react to innovation or change. Then we have a conscientiousness score of 75, indicative of a structured, goal-oriented, tells us how if they're likely to be methodical or organized in their approach. And then extroversion, we all know what that might be. Engineers, usually I'll be on the low end of that. And then suggest someone who can adapt to social engagement based on their context. And then you have a high agreeableness score, indicates someone who's collaborative. And then lastly, you have neuroticism. Now, neuroticism is interesting because a low score, obviously, that would indicate emotional stability. Higher score, less emotional stability, more variability, sensitive to stress, and that could make persona simulation a little more challenging. And also to note here, these aren't independent of each other, right? So low neuroticism with high agreeableness, that combines to make an interesting combination. So all these go together and meld together into an ultimate persona. So looking at our first study, this would be the digital footprint study. This is from 2015. We're going to examine a few studies, and we'll start with this one. So researchers, Kaczynski and Stilwell, they did this pretty interesting study in 2015 with Facebook likes, okay? So they took over 70,000 users and said, put them through the Big Five, had them answer a 100 IPIP personality questionnaire, and also gathered their Facebook likes. And so they took 90% of this data and built a linear regression model from it. And from that, they were able to take the remaining 10% of the test data and test their linear regression against real participants. So how well do Facebook likes correspond with being able to gauge someone's persona? If we look at the results here, it's pretty astounding that when you, on the bottom, you see the logistic regression of the Facebook likes increasing. And on the left, you see how accurate, on the y-axis, that's the accuracy of the persona questionnaires. So you have work colleague, your coworker on the low end on 0.27, has a 0.27 accuracy of being able to predict how you would respond to personality questions. And the red line going across is the linear regression model. Now, each of the colored lines is a different Big Five personality trait. So the next one is your friend or roommate. That would be at a 0.45. And then, now notice that at 150 Facebook likes, we can already detect, the linear regression can already detect your personality questionnaire better than your family members. And at 300 Facebook likes, it's doing better than your spouse. So Facebook's likes already indicate pretty highly what a person might answer on a personality question. But this was from 2015, so there's been quite a few advancements in machine learning in the past decade. So let's see what the modern research says, and fast forward to today. And on the top of this slide, we see that GPT and other large language models have demonstrated unprecedented abilities in maintaining consistent personas across various interactions. So the 4 key capabilities listed here at the top represent the major breakthroughs that are required to extract accurate personas from individuals or from groups of demographics. So we're going to look at 3 major research papers here, focus on steerability, measuring steerability, and then generative agent simulations. And all these will pave the way to providing us those 4 fundamental breakthroughs at the top. I'm going to do a little bit more into each of these, and starting with steerability. So, how well can we guide an LLM to consistently embody a specific persona? That's a central question here. So, looking at the framework diagram of this paper, we can see that we can see how they approach the challenge. So, we begin on the bottom right. They would just ask questionnaires to a specific demographic of people and then cluster them. So they would take these clusters and feed them into what they call a soft prompt modulation. And what they're doing here in the blue box at the top left is that's their prompt. So they're prompting in this specific situation, how often do you spend online in gun forums? And they take that prompt and along with they modify the prompt using the results of that soft prompt modulation and basically feed it a hint to the LLM before it's input into the LLM. So how often do you spend on gun forums? And then there might be a modification of that saying, answer this as if you're a upper class person from Massachusetts. And so they're basically able to steer how the LLM answers questions, and they've proven to get pretty good results with that method of steering. So how do we measure this if it's steering appropriately? Well, this leads us to the next paper, developing quantitative metrics to measure this steerability. You see, they created this text space on the left of natural language. So in this situation, they want to test whether the LLM is making the text a little easier to read. So you have your source text here, no man is an island, entire of itself. And so the LLM answers their prompt and says, we're all in this together. Then the right side is the innovative piece here. They come up with two metrics to measure, is this steerability actually performing well? Is it doing what we want? The main things you want to focus on here is the orange arrow and the green arrow. The orange arrow will be the directionality, and the green arrow will be the sensitivity. So these are subtle differences, but they're crucial. The sensitivity would be how much are you changing the text? How much are you doing what we want you to do? Are you doing it too much? Are you making it too simple? Or are you barely changing it? And then the orange is, are you actually doing what we want you to do? So are you moving in the right direction? Is the text actually becoming simpler? So how much simpler is it becoming? And then is it becoming simpler at all? This is crucial for measuring. If you can do steerability, but you can't measure how good you're doing, what's the point? And then lastly, and probably most impactfully to our current research here, is this generative agent simulation paper from just last year. The folks at Stanford demonstrated something pretty remarkable, and this is in that they were able to simulate not just a few, but 1,000 unique AI personas with consistent behaviors and traits. So here's the timeline, or here's the methodology of what they did. They started with a 2-hour audio interview with real human participants. The foundation of this was structured from the American Voices Project. And they had natural conversations about people's lives. And what makes this approach unique is how they use the interviews and the transcripts for what they call agent memory. So they put the transcripts into each agent, and they actually made a little game out of it, a 2D computer game. And the core knowledge base was what shapes each AI agent's personality. So the transcript of the conversation formed each AI agent's personality. They tested this against the actual participants' responses, and they used the Big Five personality inventory, social survey responses, and then also economic games and behavioral experiments. And the results were pretty striking. The agents achieved extreme consistency, replicating the original participants' responses very well. And then high accuracy levels. Personalities remained stable. They formed relationships inside the game, inside the simulations of what they were doing, and they maintained consistency across the entire time span of the study. So this represented a significant step forward in the ability to replicate and simulate human personas. So while we see this, we wanted to do our own test and take a different approach here. So we came up with 121 questions discovery. So Our test is, how do we capture enough personality markers to simulate future decisions with 85% accuracy? So we had 121 questions, and we started with demographics that laid the baseline of just introducing yourself as a person. And then we have life history. Values and beliefs is the biggest question group. We believe that that gave us the best information about what constitutes a person's persona, how they'll answer questions. Decision-making, social interactions, emotional responses, and behavioral patterns. All these go together into be the complete questionnaire. And so we wanted to test the scalability of this. We wanted to test how this would perform. So what we did was we had over 50 different profiles of different AI personas, carefully engineered the prompts, all with consistent background stories, and then we also tested it with some human participants. And so our framework was persona selection, questioning, collect the responses, and then analyze it using this analysis. So we did use the big five, but we also came up with this: consistency tracking, analyze the languages, and align the values, and then response patterns. So what this means is, are the responses consistent over the 121 questions? Is the language make sense? Are the values aligned as the questions are answered? And how is the response pattern tracking? So a human that has their worldviews and values, it's not going to change as they answer questions. We want to make sure the AI doesn't as well. So here's an example. So this is an actual example. I won't give away which one's AI yet, although maybe you'll figure it out. These are just the prompts, though. These aren't the results yet. The prompt of the top is a retired grandmother, 65 years old, married. And then the bottom is a 72-year-old Southern grandmother, retired teacher in Mississippi. The speech style on the top is curt responses, religious references, traditional values, and family focused. The bottom, Southern dialect, religious references, traditional values, and family focused. So let's see what the responses are like. Here's some responses to the initial demographic questions. You can see at the top, curt responses, pretty accurate. It is truly curt, simple binary answers. On the bottom, you have some very detailed dialect choices. So this is interesting. You can probably guess which one's AI at this point. But when we test the scoring of these, we get some interesting scores. The demographic consistency specifically of the retired grandmother, which is the human participant. The Southern was the AI model. The demographic consistency was lower than the AI model, and the value alignment was also lower. So that was interesting. Granted, this was a low sample size, but we wanted to emphasize that it's possible that the AI was oversteering. The sensitivity you could see was pretty high. That dialect they were adding it to every intro. So that's an example of where the steerability might come into play. But the real issue here was, I'll get into the issue in the next two slides, but the questioning could be challenging as far as scalability goes. But testing it with the big five traits, we see that the AI actually performed adequately as well with the human. So this 121 questionnaire did prove that you can replicate personas with fairly decent accuracy. However, it is hard to scale this, as I said before, because these questions are vague. Their questions are it's things like, how does this make you feel? It's personal questions. It can be hard to get. We thought about putting this in ClickWorkers or something, but it can be hard to trust the human responses to types of questions like these. So our next move forward was, how can we generate human personas or simulate personas when we want to ask decent questions? And we came up with an interesting avenue that was actually turned out to be fairly promising. Was, can we reduce the question numbers and still get beneficial persona traits? And we found out that Vogue actually publishes these YouTube videos called 73 Questions. And these are specific for celebrities, but they'll show up to celebrities' houses and ask them 73 questions. It's pretty simple. And the questions that are usually specific to the celebrity, but they are a good indicator of how the person might respond to different questions and what their big five traits are and what kind what just kind of personality they have. So we extracted some of these and turned them into a transcript. And let's take a look at Jennifer Lopez. So we extracted her transcript and we came up with her big 5 traits: 75% conscientiousness, openness, agreeableness is 7.1, 24 openness, 3.4% neuroticism, and 10.5% extroversion. So it's not surprising she's not very agreeable. But the Atlas, this is a movie she played in last year. So we took the transcript of that movie and her main character, and we ran that through it as well, and we got the big 5 traits of those. And notice how even they are. When you have a character like that, they're not as dynamic as a actual person. So that was interesting. But it was interesting to see the differences of her character versus her true personality. So that's the closing. We believe the future of AI belongs not only to we believe the future is not only in AI, but an AI with some personality. And then I also have one more demo. I know when it comes to personas, the common method, or any LLM, the common method of interaction is chatbots, but we also believe voices has a big future in AI, obviously when we know Siri and Alexa. It seems like with LLMs, the voice methods of AI have kind of gone by the wayside in favor of chatbots, but there is voice interaction that is coming more into play, and so I wanted to play this demo for you. This is a persona that we created based on the 73 questions. And let's see if it'll work.
Hi AI Symposium. It's Margot Robbie here, and it's great to be with you all. I don't know much about AI, but I'm excited to learn from you.
Hi, Margot. It's great to talk to you. We're excited to learn about you. Why don't we start off? Can you just tell us about some of the movies you've been in?
Oh, g'day. I'm so stoked you asked about my films. I absolutely love what I do. Let's see. I've been lucky enough to be in quite a few exciting projects. You might know me from The Wolf of Wall Street, where I got to work with the legendary Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio. That was a wild ride. Then there's I, Tonya, where I played the infamous figure skater Tonya Harding. That one was a real challenge, but so rewarding. And of course, I can't forget about playing Harley Quinn in the Suicide Squad films and Birds of Prey. Harley's such a blast to portray. More recently, I was in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as Sharon Tate. Working with Quentin was honestly the best ever. Did you know they don't allow cell phones on his sets? It's all about being present in the moment.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Now I'm curious, you've done some amazing movies. What do you like to do in your downtime when you wake up? What does Margot Robbie like to do when you just want to relax?
I love a bit of downtime. When I'm not on set, I'm all about keeping it simple and enjoying the little things. You know, I actually start most of my days with a nice cup of tea. There's something so comforting about that morning ritual. And if I'm feeling energetic, I'll go for a swim. There's nothing quite like diving into the water to clear your head and get the day started right. When I really want to unwind, I'm a bit of an ice cream fiend. That's my guilty pleasure. And
Okay, so we'll end it there. But that was a demo. I had an actual demo. I didn't want to risk it not working. But that was a recording of Margot Robbie simulation. And so that was based on the 73 questions. You could ask it any question you wanted to, and it would respond as her big 5 persona. And so that was pretty interesting. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. When you develop the personas, can you use RAG to then create, say, a subject matter expert with that persona?
Sure, absolutely.
And then also, do you find that the personas give different information based on what the persona is?
Yeah, so that's the. It depends on how specific of a persona you're getting to. So, you know, if you're talking about trying to replicate a demographic group, it's quite possible that the answers will be similar. But if you want to replicate a specific person, then ideally, what motivated us to do this was how specific can we get to basically, could we extract information from a persona that might not be widely available, but only to a specific persona. So the answer is yes, you could, but you would obviously have to, it depends on the information you're using for the persona to feed it.
When it comes to personalities, right? As humans, when we have discussions and conversations, something that I've noticed and kind of relating it to AI is, well, I oftentimes go off into tangents, just off topic. Mm-hmm. And hearing your demo with Margot Robbie, she was very to the point. And I guess, do you see any of that happening at all with personalities being added to AI?
Yeah, so that would be, if you've played with LLMs, there's a feature, or there's not a feature, a parameter called temperature. And so that would be, I'd say, a factor there is you could have a dynamic temperature of an AI persona where, depending on the model or depending on the time of day, depending on whatever you wanted, you could set the temperature to specific value where the answer to a question might be more random versus a direct response. But that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, these personas, while they can, they're definitely getting better every day, there's still an element of randomness that is somewhat hard to kind of nail down.
Hello?
Hey.
Oh. So is there a chance that you can alter the 72 questions to a point to where you can get two different personalities to converse with each other to solve complex problems, such as mathematical problems or things along those lines?
Alter the 72 questions. I don't know if altering the 72 questions would be for math problems. Sure, you could make the questions whatever you wanted to, but as far as having two people converse, you would just need two different personas. But yeah, I don't see why not. You couldn't do any of that. Yeah. Two different.
On the impossible
Sure.
test, when you guys were putting all those questions, you posed them as if they should say, I don't know. Did you uncover anything, AIs that actually answered something that had been a problem that wasn't solvable, where the answer isn't I don't know, but they came up with something original and solving it?
So the way we framed the impossible test was we sourced all these questions from the academic community's list of unsolved problems, so by definition there is no answer. And aside from that, we limited the types of responses to the 4 answer choices that we created. So if you remember, 3 of those were made up, and then one of them was the correct answer, I don't know. So there sure is a potential for AI to answer these unknown questions, but the actual framing of the test, we limited it to I don't know being the only right answer.
My question was for the impossible test as well. I was wondering if y'all noticed any tendency for the models to answer I don't know based on the content that the model was trained on, or if y'all thought it was more so emergent from the architecture of the model.
Well, at the end of the day, these are all going to have some sort of transformer-based architecture. That's what these large language models widely are. And as far as the actual data that all the big players are using, I think they kind of keep that close to the chest. So, certainly some of it is out there available to the public, scraping the web and many things there. But as far as noticing anything emergent from the way they were trained, I don't know that we can see through the veil to answer that type of question. Does that answer your question? Okay, very good.
Hi, so on the impossible test, I was wondering if you find any correlation or connection between the model's willingness to say I don't know and how frequently it hallucinates, or if it will hallucinate irrespective of whether it knows the answer.
So I would argue that anytime it doesn't answer I don't know, in a way it's hallucinating because it's picking an answer that was made up in the first place. So it's very confident, kind of akin to the Dunning-Kruger effect, that I'm confident this is the answer, although it's a hallucination in and of itself.
Hey, on the personality test, did you do any looking at what personality may be more likely to purchase something or, what those personalities, how you would act with those differently, and maybe pricing, or, some of the useful things that
Sure.
you could get out of that. If AI could, put somebody in a personality type, then you can, market to them differently, or
Sure, yeah, it's a great
adjust the
question.
pricing.
Yeah, no, we didn't, but I mean, off the bat, I would say openness would be like the biggest kind of the big five. Openness would be a big one, but no, we haven't looked specifically at those, but that would be like, I'd say my first future research kind of paragraph would be market analysis.